Sunny Melendrez, Sunny Radio, sunnyradio.com.
Hello, it's Sunny Melendrez, and welcome. You have found the positive side of the radio spectrum. This is the Sunny Melendrez Show, and every week we strive to bring you entertainment and inspiration through storytelling, fascinating guests, exclusive celebrity interviews, and it's all delivered with lots of enthusiasm. Now, I cannot wait for you to meet my very special guests this week, Kevin and Stephanie Mason. I know their story will inspire you. But first, we're brought to you by Ideal Precision Roofing, serving San Antonio, Boerne, and the Texas Hill Country. Now, I must tell you that I've had the pleasure of speaking to so many homeowners in our area who have used Ideal Precision Roofing. And one of the questions I asked them is, what would you say to someone who is thinking about repairing or replacing their roof? Well, here's what homeowner Jennifer Degner had to say about Ideal.
Ideal Precision Roofing will go above and beyond your expectations, and you will be thrilled with the results, and the customer service will definitely have you recommending them to everybody that you know.
Thank you, Jennifer, for choosing Ideal, an Owens Corning Platinum Preferred contractor. So if you're needing a new roof, don't delay. Call today. Ideal Precision Roofing at 210-485-1553. That's 210-485-1553. 1553, or visit idealprecisionroofing.com and tell them that Sunny Melendrez sent you. And now, on with the show!
Sunny Radio, sunnyradio.com.
You know, one of the joys of hosting this program is the opportunity to meet and reconnect with some of the most fascinating people I have ever met. Well, it is indeed the crossroads of entertainment and inspiration. And on this week's show, you're going to be entertained and especially inspired by my very special guests. Kevin and Stephanie Mason are themselves hosts of the wildly popular podcast, Tell Us a Good Story. Well, you're about to hear their remarkable story, from the night they met to the obstacles that they would face. There is nothing ordinary about their journey. In their voices, you will hear humor, love, positivity, resilience, hope, and most of all, faith. Do not let your ears wander from my very special visit with my new dear friends all the way from Columbus, Ohio, Kevin and Stephanie Mason. Welcome.
That was fantastic.
I almost started tearing up. That was amazing.
It's almost like he's done this before.
Have you done this before once or
I
twice?
have.
Really good.
Have you?
Times. Yes. I spend all my time between visits with you rehearsing. That's all I do.
That was fantastic.
Sonny, that was amazing. Thank you.
You inspire me. Let me tell you something. Your book, which is really an incredible journey. In fact, it's called Our Journey of Healing Through Hope and Hot Wings. And the title of the book is You Met Her Where? And I want to start with that part of your life, that chapter of the two of you. Tell me about where you met.
Oh my gosh. Steph, should we divulge that?
Do we want to divulge it?
I can give the quick version.
Give
here.
the quick synopsis, babe.
Okay, so my dad called me up one night and said, "Hey, I just found the perfect girl for you." And I was like, I bet you didn't, right? I'm sure you didn't. And he's like, no, trust me. I just met her. And I was like, Dad, where'd you meet her at? And he said, Hooters. And I was like, you met her where? At Hooters? And then, long story short, my dad made me go with him to the restaurant. And this beautiful woman here beside me ended up being our server. And it's just an awkward situation, me going there for the very first time with my dad. And of course, the book goes through all the funny moments, all the awkwardness, and just amazing. Just knowing me, how shy I was, introverted, and to end up meeting my wife at Hooters is just like crazy.
It's crazy.
To think about. Yes.
It's pretty crazy. Only a God moment right there.
I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, it was pretty incredible. That's where we met.
That right there in itself is a God moment at Hooters.
Never heard it explained like that, but yes.
Yes.
And Stephanie, what did you think when you met Kevin?
Oh my gosh. So
that man is going to have my children.
no,
right?
no, I
Oh,
did
no,
not.
that
Definitely
wasn't
didn't
it.
think that.
No.
So he walked in and I just saw this guy. And I remember he had a red hat. And it was on backwards and he had like cute cargo shorts and a t-shirt. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's cute. He's muscular. He's sporty looking. I was like, ooh, this might be something. I was excited to meet him.
And so I just remember that night meeting Steph, Sunny, and the first thing is just her bubbly personality. That hit me so hard. And then she wasn't trying to impress me at all. You were just very authentic. And I just remember leaving like, okay, that girl was really cool. And then I think I called you the next day.
Yeah.
Right? I wasn't going to waste time.
So how long before you proposed?
Well, Sonny, I was thinking he was going to propose sooner than he did. I mean, it had taken him a couple of years. He had, unfortunately, his parents divorced and it was really hard on him. And at that point, he didn't want to marry anybody.
No.
He, didn't really trust marriage. He didn't believe in divorce. So he was like, okay, if my parents didn't make it, I'm not going to go through that.
Sonny, I just remember the hurt, even as an adult, the hurt that I experienced from my parents divorcing after 27 years. And my dad being a minister for my whole childhood, right? So he was a minister for over 20 years. And so they divorced when I was, I think, 21. And just the hurt that I experienced through that. And so at that point in my life, I was like, it's just not worth it.
So you started saving up for a motorcycle, right? He
Yes.
was saving up for a motorcycle.
Okay, Sonny,
Yeah.
so let me give you my version of this story. Okay.
Yes.
So when I met Steph, she was unlike any other female I'd ever met in my life. So I was like, okay, if this ends up being serious and I change my mind on the idea of marriage, I better have some funds put away for an engagement ring. So it was probably 2 months after we met. I started every week or every bi-weekly, whatever I was getting paid, I would put money away to savings account. So if it did get serious, I would have money for engagement ring. If it didn't work out, Sonny, I would have money to buy a motorcycle. So it was a win-win for me, right?
Exactly.
And I still have never owned a motorcycle in
He
my
has
life.
not. No.
I have not.
So every time you look at her ring, do you think of the motorcycle?
No, I just think that's one of the best decisions I ever made in my life.
That's good, babe.
Well, at least you didn't give her a ring in the shape of a motorcycle.
That's true.
So that's good.
Well, Sonny, I mean, I had heard some terrible engagement stories, and then we heard yours. Yours
Wins.
Yours
Sonny.
wins every
Yours
award
wins.
possible with how to propose to your girlfriend. So hats off to you, sir.
No. It's different for everyone, and it happens when it happens. And like you, when you're not looking is when all of a sudden a Stephanie, comes into your life, and it's just
Right.
just a wonderful thing.
Stephanie had been single for all of 5 minutes, I think, when we met. So it was a God thing. It was like perfect timing too. So I had
There
like
you
a
go.
small window.
There you go. Now, did you talk before or shortly after you got married about having children?
We were on a 5-year plan.
We were on a 5-year plan.
We wanted to just enjoy each other. We wanted to travel. We wanted to just have fun and focus on our marriage. We were both new into our careers, me as a nurse, Kevin as a CPA in the finance industry. So we just wanted to just enjoy each other, enjoy being married.
Now, you started your career as a nurse,
Mm-hmm.
and tell me about that fateful day when something very wrong happened.
So I was a surgical nurse. I loved being a nurse. I loved being in surgery. There was so much action. And I was fortunate. I was able to go from different ORs because I knew pretty much every surgery that this hospital performed. And I was getting ready to do a case, and there was a nurse who was pregnant and she needed to go to the restroom. I'm like, I'll go in, I'll relieve her so she can take a break. And they were doing brain surgery. So when they were in brain surgery, I was like, oh, I need a piece of equipment. Are you guys using it? And I think the anesthesiologist is like, no, it's fine. So as I bent down, there's this tower. It's called a Bovie tower. And in this tower, it's a metal tower and it has all these different shelves. And one of the shelves has the piece of equipment that I needed. So I was like, well, let me see where it's connected to. And I go and I use my right hand to move a wire. And when I did that, there was an electrical current that went through my right index finger, traveled up my right arm, and just dispersed throughout my body. At that point, there was loud popping noises in the OR and sparks went flying. And I remember immediately everyone just stopped and they looked around and they looked at me and they said, "Are you okay?" And at that point, the nurse I was relieving came back in and I said, "I'm fine." I was kind of just shaking. I'm like, "No, I'm fine." And the nurse came in, I left with my scrub tech and she said, "Are you really okay?" And I'm like, "This sounds weird, but my head just feels staticky." It was the best way I could describe it. So we end up going to my next case. I'm preparing the room. And then all of a sudden people start finding out what happened to me. And all of a sudden my manager comes in and she's like, "Oh my gosh," she's probably a good 5 to 8 feet from me. And she's like, "Stephanie, I can smell you." It was like this burnt singe was just permeating from my body. But I didn't have any entry or exit wounds, which was very strange in that particular case. I had an irregular heart rhythm. They told me to go home. I went home and the doctor they found out what happened. And they said, "You need to come back in, Stephanie, because the amount of voltage you received, your heart could stop at any moment." Well, I wasn't ready to do that. A, because Kevin wasn't home. I wasn't safe driving. And B, we all know if we go back to an ER, how long would I stay in the ER? So I just remember praying to God, like, "God, I need you to protect my heart. I need to just keep beating. And I need to wake up in the morning." I went to bed, woke up, felt amazing. But as soon as I stood up, that's when things started going downhill pretty quickly. From that point on, I had severe headaches. If you looked at my abdomen, it just quivered from the amount of voltage that I received. I had severe cognitive thinking issues, hallucinations, short-term memory loss. My cycle stopped. So it was a pretty crazy 4 years from that moment on.
Wow, 4 years. That's a long time.
So at one point I got so desperate, I contacted the National Institute of Health and I'm like, they could help me because they take on rare cases. And I remember getting a phone call back and they said, "Stephanie, we kind of link you to a lightning strike victim. However, the way things happen to you, these victims don't survive." They told me through all the testing that the whole front and left part of my brain, for lack of better words, was completely fried from that current. So
Unbelievable.
It was
Unbelievable.
crazy.
So all those brain cells then came back?
They
healed
regenerated.
themselves?
Yep.
Yeah.
So after hearing there was no hope and struggling, I remember looking at Kevin and he had just finished his MBA program and we went to Florida to celebrate. And while we were in Florida, I started reading these books about faith and about getting pregnant and about supernatural healing. And I remember being at the pool and I looked at Kevin and I said, "I'm pregnant." He's like, "Wait, what? What? When did you take the test?" I'm like, No. I am believing at this point I am pregnant. Like my faith was so built up. I knew I was pregnant to the point where by the end of this vacation, we were picking baby names. We were thinking about what the nursery was going to look like, how we were going to tell our parents. Like my faith was so built up. I just knew I was pregnant. And unfortunately, at the end of the vacation, I had another very severe headache, which usually put me in the ER. And at that point, my doctors just gave me morphine injections that I could give myself to keep me out of the ER. And I told Kevin, I'm like, "I'm not taking this," because I was so believing that I was pregnant that I didn't want to harm the baby. And he said, "Steph, please take this." And I remember getting home and I took a test and it was negative. And I said, "God, I'm still believing I'm pregnant, but I am also trusting that if I give myself this injection, you will protect our baby." So took the medication, usually knocked me out for a good day or two, and called my OB, still, believing that we were pregnant. And she's like, "You need to take this medicine, but you need to take one more pregnancy test." So I took the test and it came back positive. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's happening. It's happening." So took the test, called the doctor's office, and they said, "Well, ma'am, when was your last cycle?" And I said, 6 months ago. And they said, "Excuse me?" And I said, "Yes." And they're like, "We need to see you." Kevin and I got into the office and I said, "Babe, we need to believe that this baby is the size of a peanut, because if it's the size of a peanut, then it's bigger than a pea and we're further along." And he's like, "Okay." So we get the scan and our baby had arms and legs and was moving everywhere. So when we were in Florida and I told him I was pregnant, I was actually pregnant on that time.
Wow.
And then Sunny, through that pregnancy, all the side effects that she had from the electrocution. The short-term memory loss, the hallucinations, all of that went away. And so we end up having, our miracle baby number 1.
Yep. And I was completely healed after that.
Yes.
That is incredible. But your faith, that there right there is the most incredible story, is the story of faith and how incredible it is when God has a plan for you and you believe in that plan and you trust in that plan. Wouldn't you say?
Right.
Absolutely.
100%. So after we had Emmy, we were going to try for baby number 2.
Round 2, right, Sonny?
Yes. Yeah.
And we were having infertility issues, and Steph went to the doctor, and the blood results came back looking like something was off. Well, they end up finding a brain tumor. I remember going to the hospital. I remember talking to doctors, Sonny, and it goes along with what you just said. But the doctors would tell me and pull me aside, like, hey, Mr. Mason, just want to let you know that the risk involved with brain surgery. Okay, we believe that we're professionals. Everything's going to be okay. However, there is a chance that when your wife wakes up from the surgery, she's not going to be the woman that you married. She may have a completely different personality. Hopefully she remembers you. Hopefully she has her same personality, all of that. But we just want to make you aware. And so I remember that day, we're going in the hospital very early. I pray with my wife, say goodbye. And then I remember in the waiting room there, I'd been so frustrated, so heartbroken, Sonny, because she got electrocuted 2 years into our marriage, right? And from a career perspective and just being an adult, we had done everything we possibly could to prepare to have a family, right? Getting her education, me going back to grad school,
getting our finances in order.
Getting our finances in order, all of that, right? But here I am in these doctor's appointments, and there's nothing I can do. It doesn't matter my connections. It doesn't matter my status, my influence. It doesn't matter how much money I have. None of that matters. It doesn't matter the house that we had, right? It didn't matter, right? If my wife can't survive this, my wife can't live a quality of life, none of that matters. And so me as a husband, father, I'm always trying to help solve problems. I'm always trying to help bring the solutions.
Yes.
Right? And in this situation, Sonny, there's nothing I could do. I mean, these doctors are even just telling me, hey, we are practicing medicine. We are doing our best. And so in that hospital, in the waiting room, I remember I just had the moment. I'm like, okay, God, I'm done. I give my wife to you. She's in your hands. Do what only you can do. And Steph came out of that surgery. And 4 weeks later, you called me at work. It was a Monday morning, calls me at work, and she's sobbing. And I'm like, oh, no, this is not good. This is not good. I'm hearing my wife cry on the other end of the phone. And she goes, Kevin, I just got my period. And that was the first time in years that you had your period. And Steph was like a teenager going to CVS.
Sonny,
and
I was
Walgreens.
going to the grocery store. I could not buy enough feminine hygiene products. Like I wanted everyone to look at my grocery cart. Yeah. I wanted the scanner to say something. It was like I was like a teenager. I'm like, this is amazing. And I remember I was cramping. I'm like, oh Lord Jesus, thank you for these cramps. Like it's perspective, right? It's like what you don't have and you finally get it back. It's like, it's amazing. And so it's all about perspective. So it was just such an incredible experience. And then 2 weeks later, we were pregnant again with miracle baby number 2.
Isn't it ironic that the surgery that gave you that new life again was brain surgery, and that was the kind of operation that caused you to get electrocuted in the first place?
Absolutely.
Like a big cycle. But I can appreciate your, having appreciation for something that was taken away from you. And now all of a sudden it's back and you don't mind all the small stuff. So when did baby number 3 show up?
Yes. So we have our baby, little Elle, and she's 5.5 months long, or 5.5 months old. And I'm like, what better thing to do than go to Disney World with a 5.5-month-old, right?
Yeah.
And a 4-year-old.
So we take our 4-year-old or 5-month-old and we go to Disney. And the day before we go to Disney, Kevin's like, hey, babe, should I be concerned about this? And he turns his jaw and this mass, like a golf ball, pops out of his jaw. And the nurse brain in me said, I know exactly what that is. But the Christian brain said, don't speak the words, because life and death is in the power of the tongue. So don't you dare lay claim to what that is. So we go to Disney World, we come home, go to the doctor's office, and within a week or so, he was having surgery and had been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
And that was the exact diagnosis that my grandmother had when I was in 8th grade and she passed away from. And so, I mean, it's pretty crazy, right? When you're in the hospital and they give you the good news is you have a 65% chance of living to age 40, right? And you're like, that's the good news? So you're telling me there's 3 people in this room, 1 in 3 is not living here in 5 years. And they're like, yes, that's the good news. And so we had a 6-month battle with cancer, got through surgery with my lymph nodes and all that. And then I was declared cancer free. And then, gosh, I don't know, 5-6 months later, we conceived, and unfortunately we had miscarried. So that was another traumatic thing that we had to deal with. But by the grace of God, we got pregnant again with our little man and delivered. We were going home. And as we were getting ready to leave the hospital, the doctor looked at me and said, I'm going to need you to go to Children's Hospital. And I was like, oh, what's wrong? And they said, we feel like there's something going on with your son's heart. And I was like, no, there's nothing going on, but I'll do my due diligence. I'll be a mama. And so a few days later, we go to Children's Hospital. Unfortunately, Kevin had to go to work. And they said, ma'am, your son has 2 holes in his heart. And I was gutted. I'm already hormonal. I just delivered our 3rd miracle baby. And then, it's one thing when it's your husband and you, but when it's your baby and you're just gutted. And I remember getting in the car and sobbing and calling Kevin. And he was so good to me, Sonny. He said, Steph, look what everything we have gone through. You are going to speak over our baby. You are going to say nothing negative. You are only going to speak positive in the word of God. And we're going to get through this. And I remember I put on my big girl panties, my mama bear panties. And I said, you're right. This is what we're going to do. So every time I went to our pediatrician, I remember just talking. I'm like, okay, what do you hear? And the doctor's like, Stephanie, I still hear something. There's still something going on. I'm like, okay. But it's not going to be like that for much longer. And by month 12, I looked at that pediatrician and I just started smiling. I'm like, what do you hear? And he's like, and he just shook his head. I'm like, you don't hear it, do you? And he's like, I don't. So he's like, go to Children's Hospital. I went to Children's Hospital and our son was completely healed. So it was pretty awesome.
Miracle after miracle after miracle. And it's certainly a tribute to your faith. Well, we've gone through this incredible pandemic and we're still not completely out of it. And there are so many people who lost loved ones and so many people who are hurting just because of life and the way things that have happened to them through no fault of their own. What encouragement or what words would you say to someone who might be in one of those situations?
I'll let you go.
I would just say you never know what someone's going through just by looking at them. You never would know that I was electrocuted and I couldn't speak properly, or who knew what was going to come out of my mouth. So I would just smile, or you just never know what people are going to go through or what they are going through. So just be kind. Be kind to everyone. And the people that are going through something, don't lose faith. Don't lose hope. Because you can make it. You can fight and you can make it, and surround yourself with people who will cheer you on and not tear you down.
And I remember going through this stuff, right? And I was constantly feeding myself with positive podcasts, right? Or quotes, getting into the Word of God, reading the scriptures, but constantly feeding on positive things, right? And then when I would talk to other people, I'd be like, man, they're going through something far worse than what I am.
Yes.
Far worse, right? And just having an attitude of gratitude of what we've been blessed with, right? Mm-hmm. And so I would encourage people to stay strong, because it is only a season, right? We always think it's so permanent, what we see right now, but just keep in mind, this too shall pass, right? It's just a season that before you know it, you're going to be on the other side of that mountain.
Amen. I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to count you as 2 of my new best friends, because
Amen.
when we found out one day that we all came from some planet. All people are just happy, and we're planted here by God for a specific reason.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for spending time with my listeners, and thank you very much for such an incredible, inspiring, faith-filled story.
Thanks, Sonny.
Thanks for having us.
Well, there you have it. My visit with my very dear new friends, Kevin and Stephanie Mason. You'll find all their links to their website, to their new book, as well as Instagram and more on the show notes at sunnyradio.com/show. That's sunny with an O, radio.com/show. Until next time, I'm Sonny Melendrez, reminding you that where there is hope, there is faith. And where there is faith, miracles happen. Bye-bye.